I have a great HOA and Karen video for you today. Here's our first story. The whole homeowners association gets Tyrannosaurus Rex, literally, posted by Deleted. I used to live in a 2-story townhouse in Vancouver around 2010 with my parents. Keep in mind that this is in Canada, where HOAs are not as common as the USA and are not seen as evil. But this HOA was different. First, the characters. My mother was a 50-year-old woman working at a grocery store, and as we were Muslims, she wore a headscarf. She was a very nice woman to everyone that she met, including people that she knew hated her for whatever. Kill them with kindness, right? I was in engineering school and about to graduate in a few months. My father was a regular working man. He is not important in this HOA story. What the problem was, these HOA jerks were a group of fat, possibly retired and stay-at-home moms and dads. They made bullcrap rules like, all the floor mats must be straight, and inspection of your suite will be done bi-monthly. And the worst, which was, no overnight or late-night guest. We owned our residence, and here these jerks were trying to ruin it, making it seem as if we were tenants. My family was wanting to bring my grandmother to Canada, and the visa just made it through. We were excited to have her, so we go to the airport and come back with her. Meeting of the HOA butts on the way. She asked us straight, "Who is this and why does she have bags?" Wait, what? I said she will be staying for a month and it's my gran. The hippo's eyes locked onto my gran and said, "You can't be here?" Right. Since she didn't speak English, my gran looked in confusion. In the end though, my mom and I had a large convo with this jerk and she agreed to give us one last warning. Whatever. The next day at 11 p.m., the jerk knocks. What's wrong? I am going to let you know that I will have to issue you guys fines if I cannot see your mother's back on the security cameras. Her face was visible, but I need a proper view in case we get burglars. What the heck? It was late, so I didn't argue, so I just went back without telling my mother. The next day, she does this same ordeal, but with my mom. She was furious and she told her to leave and to not be racist. The HOA jerk yelled, "Islam's not a race, you freaking slur," witch, and left. I will never ever forget that night. My mother wept like a baby for the night, and it was the worst freaking night of my life, second to only when she passed away last year. I could not see this BS continue. I did what I thought would be best. I went around and I took questions from every single house and asked about this bee. They all said the same thing, and on my way home, I noticed a freaking fine being written on our door for failing to keep our floor mat straight. It's a circle. How are we supposed to make it straight? At any rate, I spent some time on Reddit asking legal advisors from Canada on what can be done. They all recommended I get a form of proxy for all residents that will let me vote for them just via myself. I got around 50 people out of 60 to sign it, and boy was I ready. The next election, I voted every single one of those jerks out, and I made my mother the head of the association. I got the position of vice president, and I removed all of those rules. The next day, I made the rules for our new HOA, and all it said was literally this. This HOA exists only to make sure no other HOA can take its place. There are absolutely no enforced rules here besides keeping your portion of the hallway clean and no interfering with other members' residence. That, my friends, is how I made the old HOA extinct. The jerk people became really friendly afterwards. I screwed up by fooling around with a neighbor who's on the HOA board. I know this is a first world problem, but it still sucks. I'd fooled around with a neighbor who happens to sit on the board of our building's HOA. It hadn't been an issue until recently when I declined to fool around with him. I learned that he had been dating some girl, and as far as I can tell, she does not know that he has an ex friends with benefits in the building. Feeling uncomfortable about the friends with benefits arrangement, I told him very politely what my reasons were for saying no to a request for action. We'll leave it that way. I had to remind him very calmly and rationally that he cannot grandfather in doing stuff when he is in a relationship with someone else. Life does not work that way. Well, I think he's angry. I can't prove it without a lot of expensive legal fees that I don't think is worth the squeeze, but in short, he sits on the HOA board, and I'm pretty certain that he's an influential voice on the Architectural Improvement Committee. This is the committee that residents have to submit unit alteration applications to for approval. Yes, even something like wall mounting TVs or putting a planter on the balcony. One of the items that needs pre-approval is outdoor furniture. I imagined it was pretty pro forma. Fill out the application, make sure it's heavy enough that it won't fly off the balcony and hurt someone on the street, and bam, approved. When I saw this set that I liked for an outdoor refresh, I placed the order because I thought it would be approved without problems. It was a limited sale and a very good deal. Then I got the rejection on Friday. To make matters worse, the furniture had already been delivered because it took the HOA forever to review the application. The reason the committee provided was that the color of the sunbrella cushions were not consistent with the aesthetic of the common spaces. I immediately replied with a question. Why did Unit X get approved for their teal cushions and mine got denied? Their reply was that it was an oversight. Moving forward, they would not allow unapproved colors anymore. I just know it was him. I can't prove it without getting an attorney and alleging inconsistent application of HOA rules, depose them and find out. But again, the juice is not worth the squeeze. I can get new cushions that are neutral, but I can't return my fun cushions and I'm out several $100s because of it. This sucks so much. Do you agree with this answer? So first off, your HOA should have official records. Any decisions on the Architectural Control Committee are part of those official records, including emails concerning those decisions. You as a member have access to those records and they cannot refuse you access. So request to see the records related to your refusal and you'll know right quick if he was involved. He should have recused himself after disclosing his conflict of interest. If he didn't, tell the rest of the board of directors and they'll fold pretty quickly to your request. Or even request his resignation, which seems like it would all be to the best. All that aside, I should note that, in most states, they have to respond to your request for a proposed architectural change within 30 days. If they don't respond quickly enough, you can absolutely move forward with the change and they can go pound sand. Given you note that they took forever to respond, they might have already effectively forfeited their right of refusal to your request. This one got messy. What would you do if you were OP here? I would push it further, possibly, but man, retaliation. Homeowners Association board member causes a crappy Christmas, posted by Nevada Drifter. Our lovely HOA has decided that should you choose to decorate your exterior for the winter holiday season, your lighting may not have 2 consecutive bulbs that are the same color, unless all of your lights are the same color. Last year, I hung my usual blue lighting and intentionally swapped in 1 red bulb, just to tick off our HOA CC&R enforcement officer. It took 2 days before I had a friendly phone call, another 3 days until I received a certified letter, and an additional 5 days until a $50 violation fine showed up. The holidays passed, and I continued to fight the fine. I refused to pay it. Late fees started to build, and eventually I was summoned to an association meeting. I compiled a list of some of the most insane HOA regulations that I could find to compare to the insanity that I was dealing with. I admitted that I changed the bulb intentionally, and I pled with the HOA board to have a little reason. It turns out that while a majority vote was needed to pass a new regulation, a unanimous vote is needed to change or repeal a regulation. All of the HOA board members, with the exception of one, who just so happened to be the old woman who cited me for the violation to begin with, agreed that the rule was unnecessary. This old hag proceeded to argue that, even though she didn't live on my street, my lighting had ruined her Christmas, and presumably the Christmas of everyone on my street. Finally, someone on the board pointed out that, while they needed a unanimous vote to change the regulation, they only needed a majority vote to remove another member of the board. An immediate vote was taken, and the lighting jerk was removed from the board. A motion was made to revote on my case, and it was immediately dismissed. How I screwed over an anti-race, horrible, bigoted business owner and likely resulted in him going out of business faster. posted by Reddit admin Dumb87. This occurred in a southern state. I won't mention the state cause, well, you'll see. I was an account manager for a digital marketing company. We sold lead generation services to business owners to generate leads. One of our key selling features was, if you turned on call tracking numbers plus recorded phone calls, we'd guarantee you X amount of leads based upon Y spend. And if we failed to meet that, you'd be entitled to partial, or if we really failed, potentially full refunds. Some things to know about advertising. A CTN is a call tracking number. It's a unique number that's assigned to a certain point of advertising that consumers call. This number is only on that piece of advertising. It routes to the business line, and unless the consumer is very observant, they have no idea that they're using a CTN. Call recording. If you turn on CTNs, we can record the calls and store the audio on our servers. The business has to consent to this. Also, when you call, you'll hear a message. This call is recorded for quality assurance type message. Both of these are required to be eligible for our service guarantee. Story time. Part 1. The lay of the land. The business in question was a small dad and son contracting company with a couple employees. They primarily focused on smaller jobs, such as windows, drainage, finishing, and so on. Unfortunately, this business owner was a royal pain in the butt. He went back years and his account was filled with nothing but complaints. Also, there was a strong suspicion that he was anti-race because his last account manager was African American. The business owner, who we will name Scott, refused to ever meet in person with the previous manager. Also, I was white. He had no issues finding the time to sit down with me and tell me how crap our service is. Well, it's coming up to due contract renewal, and he says we aren't producing his leads, and he wants to put in a claim for failing to meet our service guarantee. I spoke to my manager about this, and he said he wants me to listen to his calls, write a detailed report, and present my findings to the manager. The manager is worried this may end up in court due to the dollar amounts involved. Nearly a whole working week of hours. I probably spent dang near 40 hours on this, and I wrote a detailed 24-page report outlining the results of our advertising. To say that I shredded this business owner's business practices is an understatement. The report was a straight-up attack on his poor customer service skills, disorganization, inability to execute, and complete and total failure of anything resembling any sense of standard business practices, well, that just make logical sense. I will share with you a few examples of the types of calls I listen to. Small calls where multiple phone calls are truly epic in their total incompetence. Customer 1. I was a small-time landlord who had 3 different properties that had received a quote from Scott for work. The landlord had accepted Scott's quote and agreed to do business. In one voicemail message, offered to pay a deposit to start work. Throughout 4 voicemail messages, this poor landlord went from, "Hey, I want to pay you," to "Are you okay?" to "Why the heck aren't you returning my calls?" Yes, I said voicemails. Scott had gone out to this man's properties, quoted his pricing, and then straight up refused to do anything more. Why? I legit got no idea. I called the customer in question and said I was a quality assurance agency and was doing a survey on Scott's performance. The guy ended up paying Scott's competitor about 15% more to do the work and was utterly beside himself on why Scott ignored him. I was also confused. FYI, all my calls were recorded and put into the company records. Customer 2. This one in particular really ticked me off. Again, the public housing office called Scott to get a quote on work that involved 25 different homes. Scott was kind enough to answer the phone this time, which ironically was one of the few freaking times he ever answered the phone. Initially, Scott sounded happy to get such a big profitable job. Then Scott learned 2 things. It was Section 8 housing, and it was a neighborhood that was African American and Hispanic. Immediately upon learning this, Scott informed the housing office that, unfortunately, he's super booked, not true, and that this area is actually out of his service area, not true again, and the housing office was confused, and they were like, so you're not interested in bidding? And Scott said, no, I'm not, and hung up. He didn't even say goodbye. So I did a quality assurance call to the housing office, and the lady was completely confused why Scott wasn't even remotely interested in the job. Luckily for Scott, the lady didn't connect that Scott was an anti-race jerk, caused discrimination against a protected class is a crime. Customer 3. It was an overseas phone number from Japan. A service member stayed up late to call Scott during his business hours. This person told Scott he was deployed overseas. Still, over the weekend, someone broke into his home back in the States, where Scott operated out, and he was trying to arrange for a new door. He mentioned this was an emergency, as his wife was being forced to stay at a hotel. Scott never returned his calls, nor made any effort to contact him on the email he provided, nor called his wife, who was local. It was a super easy job that Scott could have done in about an hour or so and made a solid profit. I think that's enough examples. Part 2. Review and plan. The actual report at the end said out of the X phone calls, Scott failed to properly service the leads in about 70% of the cases, and that I could keep on going on. Still, I felt X number a clear trend had been established. It wasn't that our service wasn't producing leads for Scott, it was that Scott was an anti-race, bigoted jerk who everyone freaking hated. Obviously, I said that in more professional language. When I presented the report to my manager, he looked at it and went, "Dang, 24 pages." I asked if it was fine, and he smiled and said, "I got a pretty good idea of what this is going to say." He said he'd review it and get back to me. So, a day later, he came to me and said he'd gone over the report, and the VP had gone over the report, and he asked what I thought the recommended course of action should be. My recommendation? Remove all discounts, charge Scott total price for our services, and clearly explain that our job is to provide him with leads. It's his job to sell those leads. If he can't convert our leads into business, that's not our problem. Scott was getting a 70% discount. Our price was built with discounts in mind, and my manager was like, he'll probably cancel. And I asked my manager, and is that a problem? If Scott was going to remain my client, he was going to pay dearly for that privilege. If he wasn't willing to pay, I was happy to let him walk. My manager smiled and said, nope. Part 3. The meeting. My manager and I called Scott and arranged a meeting. I created a PowerPoint summarizing my findings. About a third of the way through, Scott gives in and tells me just to get to the point. I knew this was going to be a heated meeting, so I wanted my manager present both as a support and a witness. So I explained that it's our job to bring him leads and it's his job to sell them. His failure to do that is not our problem. He gets irritable and whiny, and my manager backs me up. He goes, "Fine, I'll renew my contract at the same rate." To which I go, yeah, you see, you didn't let me get to that part. We have new pricing for you." Scott goes, "Yeah, lower?" And I go, oh no, not lower." My manager smirked, and Scott asked me for the new rate. I hit him with the full rate, which was 3 times what he was paying. Scott is furious with me, says I'm overcharging him, says I'm ripping him off, says I'm a horrible salesperson. He tells my manager that I should be fired for treating him like this. My manager looks at me, and I had been waiting for that moment. Truth be told, I gave 0 craps what Scott thought of me. If anything, my goal was to get him to cancel. "Scott, you're a challenging client, therefore the pricing of our service needs to reflect the challenge of providing you service, so we will be charging you our full rate. If you like, I'd be happy to go over why this ROI still makes sense based upon our past performance." This was wording I had gone over with my management before using it. My manager felt it was fine. I felt so amazing to say those words. It was the nicest way I could say, "You're a jerk. If I'm going to work with you, it's got to be worth my while." Scott says we are a bunch of greedy freaking jerks. He says I'm going to cancel. To which I said, "Well, that's an outcome that we've decided is acceptable if that's what you choose to do." Scott huffs and goes, "What about my refund?" Dismayed, I go, "Scott, we've clearly demonstrated we did our part. The reason why you aren't bringing in sales is because of your company's inability to close on the leads that we generate." To which Scott goes, "So you're saying that I don't know what I'm doing?" To which I say, "Scott, if you agree to sign at the new rate, I'd be happy to sit down with you and to help you free of charge on how to improve your sales techniques and close more of your leads." This is me telling him that he doesn't know how to run his business and was very much meant as an insult. Scott goes, "Nah, screw you, I'm calling my lawyer." And I go, "So I take it you're not going to renew?" He says, "Heck no." And my manager goes, "Well, that's fine. Would you like us to email you our report on your leads?" Scott goes, "Sure, I'll show my lawyer." FYI, we never heard from Scott's lawyer. We wish Scott a good day and he leaves. Later, we wrote him an email, attached the report, and also told him that if his lawyer would like the recording in question, we can send that file over as well. Our bases were covered, and we knew it. I suspect he also came to the same realization, but had too much pride to admit that. Part 4. Make sure that dagger is nice and deep. A few weeks go by, and my manager says that we gotta shut down his account, so I need to call him and ask what he wants to do with his CTN numbers, which we control. In our contract, we say at the end of the agreement, the customer has the right to have the numbers ported over for a fee. It would have been normal to waive the fee as a gesture of goodwill, but Scott desired zero goodwill and he received what he desired. I tell my manager there's no way I'm porting the numbers for free, and just like his quote, I'm charging him the full rate, $15 a number. The total came out to just a bit over $100. So I call Scott, I get his voicemail, but he doesn't answer. I write him a registered letter, and in that letter, I outline that he has 30 days to respond. We have his CTNs, and if he's willing to pay a $15 per number port fee, we'll transfer those numbers over to his phone provider. One morning, I woke up to about a dozen hateful text messages in which Scott told me to go frickin' burning heck. I took that to mean that Scott was not interested in porting over his numbers, and I reviewed those texts with my manager. We saved those messages and uploaded it to his account. So, is that all? Of course not. Part 5. But wait, there's more. So here I was with 7 CTN numbers that had been in service for literally years. Those 7 numbers were saved in Scott's customers' phones, and to many of Scott's customers, those numbers were Scott's number. Obviously, they wouldn't be advertised to anyone, but that doesn't mean they won't produce phone calls. Now, if I just let the numbers die, the customers will call and simply be told this number is no longer in service. Now, I'm not entirely sure if what I did was legal, but it's been quite a few years, so I feel comfortable about introducing you to Bobby. Bobby was another Southern boy, but as much of a butthole as Scott was, Bobby was a sweetheart. His mama would bake me pies for our meetings, and he was a complete joy to work with. Bobby also owned a similar business to Scotty, but Bobby's business was more advanced, did more types of jobs, and also serviced the same area. So I submitted a service request to port all of Scott's 7 CTNs to Bobby's account, and I waived the fee. So all of a sudden, hundreds of Scott's customers would think they were calling Scott, but they'd get Bobby. Bobby had all his calls routed to his secretary Ashley, who was an angel. Ashley was also a wickedly talented saleswoman, and I know for a fact that she'd be able to take Scott's clients and convert them for Bobby. So that's what I did. I had those 7 CTNs ported over to Bobby. This did a few things that benefited nearly everyone involved. Bobby got more business. I produced more leads for Bobby, which means Bobby was comfortable with spending more money with me, which meant I made more money, and Scott's old customers got better service. Part 6. Capitalize on my revenge. At the next performance meeting with Bobby, Bobby was very pleased with the sudden uptick in new customers. He even asked me, "What did you do to my account?" I smiled and said, "Well, I reviewed your account and made a few tweaks. Have you seen any improvement?" He absolutely did. He asked me, "Did this cost me anything extra?" And I go, "Nope." He ended up increasing our spend with us by about 40% on additional services. I Googled Scott's business about a year later. He wasn't in business anymore. Wonder why? No, my company never caught on to me porting over the numbers, and I strongly suspect that our legal department would not have been pleased. This is an HOA story about taking the head of the HOA off. A friend of mine not long ago painted his house. He lives in a development that has an HOA. He admits that he and his wife made the first mistake by not reading the HOA handbook close enough, so they didn't realize that they had to get the color approved by the HOA. On the first day of painting, the head of the HOA stopped by and talked to them, made small talk, talked about ways to make painting the house easier, and so on. At this time, the HOA head knew that they hadn't gotten the color approved because he sits on the 3-person panel that approves the colors. However, he opted to not say anything to them. Instead, he waited until they had the entire house painted and then told them that the color was not approved because there are too many other houses with a similar color. It was a lighter shade of green. So, faced with having to spend the time and money to repaint the entire house, he and his wife decided to get a little revenge. They submitted the form and the color swatch for the new color and were approved. Knowing the panel had to take time out of their lives to meet every time that they submit a color, they decided to submit another color swatch and form, saying that they had changed their minds. This color was one that they knew would never be approved. As assumed, it was denied. They had to submit again, and again they submitted a color they knew would never be approved. Again, they were denied. They repeated this 4 or 5 times before the HOA had contacted them and told them that the first swatch they submitted was still approved and to not submit another swatch for approval, that they were tired of playing games. He replied telling him that it turns out that the color is no longer available and that they needed to submit one last swatch, which, of course, was a color they knew wouldn't be approved. This time, the HOA told them that if they submitted another unapprovable swatch, they would be fined and billed for the panel's time. He submitted another swatch that was a color that he knew would never be approved, and with it, a photocopy of the page from the handbook covering the process of getting a color approved. He pointed out that there was nothing in there that mentioned any limit to a number of swatches that a person could submit. This entire process took a few months. After 8 or 9 swatches that were denied, the head of the HOA was fuming mad and showed up at their door, telling them that he wasn't leaving until they had decided on a color for the house. My friend pointed out that the handbook says the only way for a color to be approved was with a vote from the full panel. The HOA head called the 2 other people, and they came over, and once they were all sat down, he and his wife shuffled through about 10 different swatches of crazy colors before finally showing them one that was a light green color. Frustrated, they approved it and left. A few weeks later, the head of the HOA contacted him to see when they were going to paint, and he told them they already had. The swatch that they approved was the color that the house was already painted. A week later, he got an angry letter from the HOA and a bill for their time. He refused to pay and will fight it. A couple of weeks after that, everyone got a revised handbook in the mail with very detailed rules on how to get a color approved. My friend then called the head of the HOA and told him all of this could have just been avoided if he had just said something that day when he came over and talked to them as they started painting. But he decided to be a jerk, so they decided to be jerks back to him. Now, I'm no expert on the lien and fine situation and how that all plays out. I was just going off of something I was told. Apparently, if he doesn't pay the fine, they can file a lien against him and they could foreclose on his house. When I told him this, he explained that the handbook actually had a detailed procedure on how fines are to be handed out and collected. There's apparently a few steps that the HOA has to take before they'll file a lien, and none of those have happened yet. The fine is $300, so if it escalates to the next step and they try to collect the money, he will take action, even if that means swallowing his pride and paying. He's going to double check just to make sure they haven't tried to file a lien on the sly. Isn't it satisfying to get away with just getting back at the HOA? What do you think? This one's called Revolution Against Our HOA, posted by Deleted. My wife and I moved into a 64 townhome community that was 10 years old at the time. The HOA board was comprised of 5 members that were original homeowners when the community started and had been the sole board members since the community started. Their sense of entitlement was backcrap crazy. They thrived on their quarterly walkthrough of the neighborhood as they would write up every single home for some kind of violation, regardless of how minor the offenses were. Everyone gets a violation letter. Our first letter, the first month living there, was that our garage door paint was starting to peel. It was a 2-centimeter scrape where the panels met. It needed to be repainted, the siding needed to be power washed, there was a patch of green moss behind a bush, and the sliding door on the deck was dirty. There was dirt on the bottom of the door from recent rain, and it needed to be washed. We had 30 days to fix the issues or begin accruing a fee of $25 a day until they're resolved. I asked around, and everyone gets these ridiculously petty letters every quarter. No matter what you did to maintain your townhome, you were going to get a letter about something. And as this was going on, none of the major items the neighborhood needed fixed were addressed. After a decade since the construction, the ground had settled unevenly and many homes had standing water issues where it wouldn't drain after a storm. The rainwater would sit for 5 to 7 days in people's lawns. And, more importantly, there had been a legal fight with the town since the community started about our road being dedicated, meaning that the town was responsible for snow removal. Our HOA dues included paying for our own snow removal, which we shouldn't have to, and we were paying an attorney for 10 years to fight this, with no resolution in sight. Fast forward 2 years, and a few of us had enough, and we decided to band together to replace the board at the next annual meeting. The existing board got wind of this and hit us all with pages worth of issues with our properties, since if you have outstanding issues, you are not in good standing with the community. Thus, you cannot run for a board position or even vote for those running. This petty move brought the community even closer, and we all spent the weekend before the meeting helping each other clean out their HOA honeydew list. We took pictures, documented everything, then we had the US mail certified delivery of each packet with the completed list and photos to the HOA board who lived 75 feet away. Come board night, oddly enough, the lawyer was there to give an update that no progress has been made with the township on dedicating our road. He stuck around as we moved to the elections for the next board. We brought our signed petitions to add our names to the ballot. The board says we're not eligible as we all have outstanding issues with our property. We call bullcrap with our receipts from the post office that they received our completed list with documentation. They reply that they haven't reviewed them yet, and we tell them that that's not our problem and we are in good standing. Their lawyer overhears this and he states we are eligible to be on the ballot if we can confirm the issues with our homes were resolved prior to the meeting. The HOA president glares at the lawyer, but the lawyer just shrugs, saying, "The rules are the rules." With the exception of the 5 existing board members voting for themselves or each other, we are voted in nearly unanimously to replace them. I lead the revolution because I was tired of the petty bullcrap when there were real problems in the neighborhood. Sadly, the rest of the elected board members vote me as president. I have no idea what I'm doing, but we spent the next few sessions removing all the dumb violations from most of the neighbors. We went through the bylaws to really focus on what's important. What happens next? It ends up that the lawyer was a friend of the previous president and was in no hurry to resolve anything as he was enjoying our excessive bill. I notify him that if it's not resolved in the next 6 months, we're finding new representation. He was actually good at his job when pressed to do it. He won the case, the town appealed, and they tried to drag it out. He fast-tracked the appeal as it had been going on for 10 years, and we won the appeal too. The town dedicated our road, and then the lawyer pressed that it should have been done years ago, and it wasn't him slowing things down, but the town. He ends up getting us a settlement from the judge for back pay on us paying the snow removal that the town was responsible for. We ended up using that settlement to have French drains installed across much of the community to clear the standing water issues. With the money left over, we fixed a lot of the neighborhood issues that the HOA should have been doing the whole time. Fences and sidewalks in disrepair, replaced dead trees and shrubs, and so on. It was great getting all that done without having to hit our capital reserve fund. I remained president until we moved out a few years ago. Our family began to outgrow the townhome, and now we live in a new, larger development with a new HOA. I was asked to run for a position on it, and I replied, not a freaking chance, but I will lead a coup d'etat if I need to. An update. As to the original HOA president, 50-year-old male, he wasn't actually eligible to be president. He wasn't on the mortgage. The townhome was in his mom's name. No one knew because he held the books. So, being the vengeful leader at the next annual meeting, I wait until ex-pres shows up with his petition to try and get his position back. I tell him, in front of the other 60-plus homeowners, that he can't even be at the meeting, let alone vote or be on a ballot, as his name isn't on the property. But his mom is eligible if she wants to. That was embarrassing enough for the entitled little jerk. HOA thinks our residential building is a hotel, posted by PutridAd695. My country has HOAs for multiple owner occupancy buildings, and I need to rant about my family's HOA. My parents have retired into a semi-touristy area near the mountains. They bought an apartment in a building where about half of the owners rent theirs out for tourists. The other half lives in the building. The building is registered as a residential building, and even the HOA bylaws declare it a residential building. It's legal to rent out as long as it's not done commercially. However, over the last 10 years, the owners participating in tourist rentals have banded together and introduced a hotel reception with 2 full-time employees and a website, all paid for by the HOA fees because the rental pool, as they call themselves, control the HOA. They've used that to bully the residents. First off, shortly before my parents bought the apartment, the HOA decided, instead of paying for routine maintenance on the communally owned parking garage door, to just get rid of that garage containing mostly residents' parking spots. Those spots were private property. They decided this was against the will of some of the owners. Next up, they make residents help cover the bill for the reception and employees. And then they forbid residents from doing renovations or any other loud activities during vacation season, which is nearly all year round, like ski season, hiking seasons, and summer, so they don't disrupt guests. They say guests have priority. They allow guests to throw loud parties and throw their trash in the garden because it comes with the territory of living in a hotel. They won't even allow changes to the outdated patios because it ruins the hotel's uniformity. My parents did it anyway and caused the first huge fight between the rental pool and the residents. The fire department recently did a fire safety check, which is unusual for a residential building. They discovered the building was missing escape route signage and told us that we only needed them if the building was used and registered commercially. The HOA now wants to buy extremely expensive signs and bill all the owners, including residents, several $1,000s. The building is still registered residentially. This is currently the straw breaking the camel's back. I'm now helping my parents sue the HOA in the city to enforce the building's status as residential and force the rental pool to stop commercial usage or to stop billing residents for commercial usage. The twist is, one of the HOA board members who absolutely hated my parents for fighting against the HOA recently quit renting out and moved into his apartment. In response, my mom snarkily suggested that he renovate his patio to make it nicer for himself. He's also suddenly very bothered by noisy guests. Last weekend, he asked my parents out for a beer and advice on patio renovations that he plans on doing this fall during hiking season. This comment tells OP to consult whatever the country's city planning is, and then OP says they know it's a small village, they just don't really care, which is why we're suing them. We're hoping to get the board member on our side. He has some influence with other board members. And then we might be able to fire the subcontractor that runs the daily HOA operations. We've considered notifying the tax authority, but we're hesitant to subject them to potential criminal investigations. But the lawsuit has pretty good chances. The courts can't turn a blind eye. This is the part that bothers the other residents. They haven't really cared much or haven't been able to fight due to age and health issues. It's all retirees. My parents can't legally sue over things like the parking spot since it doesn't affect them personally, and the HOA dropped the patio fight in order to avoid a lawsuit. Everyone has just tolerated it for years since it didn't cost much, but the additional fire safety measures for a hotel will cost thousands. It's not just signs. 2 apartments have been declared temporarily uninhabitable due to missing escape routes. More residents' parking spots would need to be removed. We would basically have to get rid of the garden. It wasn't built to be a hotel, and significant parts of the building would need to be redone in the future. All of these things are long-term issues, and the current fight is only about the signs which need to be done immediately. But if we allow that, they could argue that we've legally accepted commercial usage, and they could possibly apply for a commercial permit. Everyone was used to the running cost and didn't really notice them in between the regular residential running cost or had no energy to fight them. The residents are all elderly, some with cancer or other severe health issues. This is the first time they would actually send a separate bill for something that the residents don't need. And my parents have been arguing about it since they bought the apartment. Don't want my help? Sure, go ahead and get yourself fired. A bit of background. A while back, when I was still in high school, I worked at the local cinema to earn a bit of pocket money and experience. I stayed for a couple years, working weekends when school was in session. I think it was halfway into my second year when the target of this revenge came into the picture. We'll call him Luke. Luke was a new hire and was just learning the ropes. Now, this was common as turnover was high since we were all students. He seemed alright at first, and everyone was nice to him since we were all pretty close and knew one another from school, and well, we welcomed him in. I don't think even a week passed before the problems started. The first issue I heard of was that Luke was trying to flirt with one of the girls. Thing was, this girl was already in a relationship with one of the other employees, and everyone knew this, including Luke. That didn't stop him though, and eventually the girl told him to his face to cut it out. It only got worse from there. Now, I do my best to see the good in people and to give them the benefit of the doubt. Despite what others were saying, I still tried to get along with him. This unfortunately changed during the first real conversation I had with him. We were on break at the same time, and about 5 of us crowded into the little break room for lunch. I forget what exactly we were talking about, but I remember that it was a pretty uncomfortable topic, and Luke was using a lot of explicatives. The break room was not soundproof, and there were patrons outside, especially children. I tried to warn him about using that language so loudly, and that he might get in trouble if a customer heard him. Immediately, his attitude toward me changed, and he responded with something along the lines of, "I can say what I want. I have the right to free speech. Don't tell me what to do." What? Sheesh, okay, chill. I was just concerned, but you do you. A few minutes later, the convo had switched to high school, and Luke was raving about how Caucasians were the majority in all the high schools in our district. Now, for my high school, this isn't true, as most of the community and students attending were Latino and made up about 70% of our student body. I told him as much. I said, "Well, that's not the case for our high school." Luke says, yeah, it is. White's the majority everywhere. I have a friend that goes there." Hey, Luke, I actually go there. It's mostly..." "Why are you talking?" he replied. I said, "Excuse me?" Luke said, "Who invited you to this conversation? I wasn't talking to you. Who asked?" Now, this irritated me. Now, I know it's a joke about looking for who asked, but this was before that became a thing, and I found it extremely rude. But in a moment of clarity, the best comeback came to mind. Like arguing in the shower by yourself, and to this day, I could only wish to be able to recreate the moment. Smiling, I threw his words right back into his face. Free speech. The others at the table were laughing as I threw away the rest of my lunch and left the break room. My heart was beating so fast from the weird adrenaline rush that I got, and I spent the rest of my break in the back of the concessions until it was time to clock back in. I think that convo was what sparked Luke's hatred of me. Ever since then, he would glare at me whenever I walked by, would dump the trash from his bin when we were sweeping the floors for me to pick up, and generally was a jerk. His behavior kept getting worse. He would threaten to fight people, and he was a short potato of a boy, really, so no one was really actually scared. He would argue, say rude, passive-aggressive, or downright racial things, and was generally just a jerk. At some point during a shift that I wasn't there, he cornered the girl that he'd been eyeing and kept verbally harassing her to the point that she hid in the manager's office where he couldn't get to her. She was a sweet and loyal girl and a friend, and she and her boyfriend could be described with the phrase puppy love and had been together for a long time. The boyfriend was angry when she texted the group chat about what had happened and wanted to get Luke fired. However, people were hesitant about this, saying that the managers wouldn't want to because he claimed discrimination, he was trans, and that he hadn't done anything blatantly wrong. Then another one of the employees made a suggestion. Luke was incompetent. We all knew this, so why not make the manager see it too? Revenge time. It wasn't hard to do, since Luke would tend to shoot himself in the foot. When possible, we'd point him out to the managers when reviewing the cameras in the halls about him dumping his trash can when sweeping onto the ground in front of patrons. When he was cursing up a storm during break, a text would be sent and someone would lead a manager to him to be caught. He rarely cleaned up. He was rude and loud, and the incident with the girl didn't help his case. It still wasn't enough, and week after week, his name was on the schedule. Then, my opportunity came. See, at the cinema, there's a position called Point, aka the ticket taker, that lets you into the theater area. It's the second most dreaded position, and the first being self-serve cleanup, as you have to stand in place and interact with customers at a rapid-fire pace, smiling and listening for theaters to be called at the same time. When the night ends, the last person on point has to close and clean the self-serve stations. Today, to my initial dread, Luke and I were both on point. The entire time, Luke would leave his station and pace the lobby, toward me and then back, not even sweeping the ground as he went. He wasn't supposed to leave point, and he had to walk around customers to get back to his podium to help them. He was told off by a manager once or twice for this, but continued his antics anyway. Then, as things slowed down, one of the managers approached me and told me that we were going down to one point, which is one person at the center, rather than at both entrances, and that I'd have to explain to Luke how to close point before I went back to help clean concessions. It had to be this way, since I had already taken the sanitation test and Luke had yet to do so, and therefore wasn't allowed behind concessions. When I finished closing my point, I walked over to Luke and told him to move his podium to the center so he could take closing point. He did, though scowling at me. When he was set, I began to explain. I said, "So you'll be closing point tonight after the last movie starts, and you'll need to go to the—" "Go away." What? "I don't need your help, so don't talk to me." "But I need to teach you how to close point." I don't care, shut up." I know you don't like me, but this is work, so you need to—" "No, I don't want your help. Shut the heck up." "But frick off and don't talk to me." At this point, I was beyond upset. I was furious. I was trying to help even after he had acted how he had treated everyone here. I didn't care what he said in the break room, but it shouldn't affect work. This was ridiculous. I must have snapped or something, because I complied, walking away saying, "Fine, I don't care, don't ever talk to me again." "Hey," I said. I waved my hand over my shoulder. "Don't talk to me ever again." I went behind concessions to help, where he couldn't reach me. I don't know when, but I started crying out of frustration, and one of my friends came and hugged me, bringing me to a corner to cool down. I don't get angry often, and when I do, it makes me scared. I was just sick of his antics, sick of the way he spoke to me, just sick of his attitude. I'm not sure how long that I sat back there, but soon enough that same friend came and waved me to the front of concessions. I wiped my face and walked out, and he pointed to point. There was Luke, being instructed by the manager on how to close point, and the manager did not look happy with him. Arms folded, frowning, flat tone, everything spoke of irritation. My friend said that they'd already explained that Luke refused my help when the manager asked him what was going on, as point can be seen and heard from almost the entire lobby. Seeing that scene lifted my spirits a bit, and I was able to end the night relatively easily. The next weekend, when the schedule came out, I didn't even have to check my email. It was posted in the group text, specifically the section with Luke's name. It was blacked out. If he had quit, his name would have been removed. But the fact that it was blacked out meant it was a sudden event. Luke had been fired. I'm not sure what it was that they fired him for anymore, but considering that we were always low on staff and they had to worry about discrimination, I'm guessing there were enough complaints that they had to fire him. I'd like to think that the last interaction that I had with him was the final nail in the coffin, but I was just glad to see him go more than anything. I heard he worked at a common fast food place for a while, but ended up getting McFired from there too. Good luck in life, Luke. You weren't missed. What happens when you give the HOA warnings they disregard and it's time to show them what you're made of? Sit down and let me tell you a tale of a crappy HOA. My husband and I purchased a condo in June of 2021. It was a downsize, but it was gorgeous. We used our extra funds from the sale of our last home to splurge on some nice things like a TV, nice couches, and a purple mattress. That bed was like sleeping on a cloud, and it was amazing. I got curious shortly after and start researching my HOA online, and I come across their Facebook page and the reviews. They have like a 2-star rating, so I was looking for tea or drama. One review catches my eye. It was a seller who we purchased from complaining about a roof leak and mold issues posted in 2018 and saying that the leak was an issue since 2013. Well, crap, I just hoped it was fixed, but was willing to let it slide, even though Florida requires those things to be disclosed, and they weren't. Whatever, I screenshot the post just in case issues popped up later, and she deleted it. Fast forward to the end of 2021. As my husband and I are sleeping, I wake up because there is a wet spot on the blanket. I then notice a drop of water fall from the ceiling. I was ticked. I fell asleep again. This happens maybe a week later, so I call the HOA and leave a message. Didn't get a response. Months go by. It's now March, so I call again and actually get someone that I could speak with. I tell her about the issue. She claims that she's going to open a work order. Cool, because this is now turning into a small bubble in my ceiling. A month goes by and I realize that the complaint from the previous owner about their failure to fix the issue is what I also was going to be facing. So I decide to email them to allow a paper trail. I sent an email inquiring about the issue in April of 2022. Rinse and repeat for months. I'm either told every time that a work order is open and never hear anything, or I don't hear back from them at all. Somewhere around May or June of 2022, the leak becomes so bad we can no longer sleep in our bed. My husband and I start sleeping on our couches. Weeks later, we decide to buy a queen mattress and stuff it into our daughter's room. And there we have been all this time. 2 different times roofers have knocked on my front door without notice to patch my ceiling. Both times they were asked if the outside was fixed, and both times I was told yes. Both times the leak started up again through the patch. Every time it rains, my ceiling still leaks all over a $3,000 bed that I cannot use, and the moisture has ruined all of my books that are next to my bed now. I tried legal aid, but they don't handle my kind of case. They referred me to the Florida bar, who were very happy to take my $50 and never get in touch. Real estate lawyers wanted anywhere from $3,000 to $10,000 up front. We are low income, we can't afford this. And to add insult to injury, the HOA also decided to raise dues in January of this year, without notice, from $254 a month to $381 a month. And for the second time since the leak has started, they've also decided to charge special assessments to replace roofs in the complex. But guess what? None of them are my building's roof. My last resort was going to be contacting the HOA's liability insurance to start a claim, but I decided to try one more lawyer. He called me today, and he specializes in suing HOAs, and he works on contingency. I'll no longer be trying to scare this HOA into action by threatening to sue. I just signed the papers to actually do it. Wish me luck, because I'm entirely done with this situation. Why aren't you going after the previous owner for not disclosing the roofing issues? Well, I haven't found a lawyer that will handle that yet. My primary issue was getting my roof fixed because we have pets and a child and I'm worried about mold. But now that I have a lawyer, I'll be looking into that. If I can't find one who doesn't ask for an arm and a leg up front, I'll probably take some of the money from this case and use it to hire one after. What would you do if this happened to you in this brand new story? Let me know. The HOA gets involved with this one. Let's find out how. Don't want to return my rental deposit? Guess I'll have your eBay and rental business shut down. Posted by Xenon Bro. This happened almost 4 years ago. I was renting out a basement in a married couple's home. They were living there too. I always paid my rent on time and I barely interacted with them. Then it was time for me to move out, so I gave them plenty of notice in accordance with the lease. In my last week, I reminded them to pay me back the deposit that I had paid before moving in, 1 month of rent. I was naive enough to pay the deposit in cash and not get a receipt for it. This was definitely my fault, but hey, I was in college and it was the first time that I was renting a place from someone. They refused to refund back my deposit, and they made some stories up about how I had damaged the carpet, broke some lease rules, and so on. None of this was true, and I even had pictures of the whole basement. I didn't want to bother with legal recourse since it would be really hard proving a cash transaction with no paper trail, so I cut my losses and I let it go. Until I had some ideas. The husband was running an eBay store from his garage. That was his full-time gig. The entire garage was filled with items and boxes and shipping material and so on. It was a very successful business, to say the least. I looked up the HOA for that community and I contacted the head. I asked him if running a business from one's home in that community was in violation of the agreement. The HOA mentioned that it was. I told him everything about this husband's business and gave him the information that I had. He said he would contact the homeowners and look into it. That wasn't it. There's a law in my city that, according to the zoning ordinance, no more than one family plus 2 renters may live in one house. Guess what? It was a pretty big house, and there were 4 other renters living in the same house. I obviously let the HOA know about this, but I also called into the code compliance hotline and I gave them a tip. Both said that they would look into it. Fast forward to earlier this year. I had almost forgotten about this whole ordeal until something reminded me, and I tried to look up this guy's eBay store and it had disappeared. I tried to find him by his name and I couldn't find any clones or other accounts or sites. After letting curiosity get the best of me, I got in touch with the head of the HOA after many emails and follow-ups, and I got official confirmation that soon after my tip-off, the HOA sent him a cease and desist letter to stop running home-based business immediately. The landlord also received a violation in failure to abide by the zoning ordinance. HOA compliance posted by Useless Skin. I hate my HOA. The only reason I live here is because the house was dirt cheap at the end of 2010. For the most part, I haven't had a lot of complaints, but during the lockdown, I decided that I wanted to give my yard some much needed TLC. It started with putting a gazebo in my backyard. I secured all the permissions that I was told that I needed and completed the work. Not 2 weeks after completion, I received a letter stating that it was out of compliance. After weeks of arguing, I had to literally pick up my 3,000-pound redwood gazebo and move it 3 more feet from the wall. Now I get letters complaining about the vegetation in my front yard. I get it, it's been neglected for a while. I'm doing my best to comply, but the trash guy only comes once a week, so I can't throw away much yard waste at a time. Cue more angry letters and enter the malicious compliance. I decided that I'm going to remove my tree and replace it. I also want to just remove 5 plants. One of them is clearly dead by now. Their paperwork specifically says that I have to submit 1 item per design change request. So I submitted 7 different requests, 1 for each plant, 1 for tree removal, and 1 for tree installation. Now they're sending me generic copy-paste replies saying that I can change the yard. None of them specify what design change was approved. I just keep replying to all of them asking for clarification. The last one I got said it was for the tree removal and planting of a new tree, but it didn't include the original letter or even a reference number. So I just replied back that I would like the specific letter included in the email so that I can have an approval paper trail. They burned me bad with the gazebo incident. I won't get burned again, and I'm having a grand time, wasting as much of their time as possible. I smile every time I reply to an email asking for specific information. An update: since many of you are saying that I should run the board, here's why I won't. I have a full-time job that requires at least 2 weeks of travel each month. I have a teenage daughter that I want to spend as much time with as possible before she moves out. We go to a BJJ Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu gym 4 to 5 nights a week, and I also have a foreign exchange student living with me that wants to see America. My wife's a principal, and I absolutely hate the HOA, so joining that team and dealing with others' hatred for it is most definitely not what I want to do with my free time. I'll play their games, maliciously. And yes, I want to move, but I don't know if you realize this or not, housing prices are insane. I'm staying put for now. HOA lady has to follow rules eventually, posted by Swites. I bought my first house in 1999 and I wanted DirecTV. I put up a satellite dish, which happened to be behind a privacy fence. I also knew the FCC ruling that HOAs couldn't prevent you from putting up a dish due to some malfeasance with homebuilders who would make shady deals with cable companies to force homeowners to go with the specific company. I think that's right. I figured I wouldn't have any issues since it was behind a fence anyway. I got a knock at my door the next day, and it was my neighbor from across the cul-de-sac telling me she's on the board of the HOA. Your dish is in violation and must be removed. This was my first encounter with her, and I politely explained the law as I knew it and told her to have a nice day. We didn't speak again, and she ended up moving out soon. Well, it turns out she didn't move out and was just renting to some other lady that I never spoke to, and the HOA lady moved back in a year later. There was an easement behind my house which was properly mowed when I moved in. I would hit golf balls down there with my wedge, and my neighbor was into archery and used it as his range. By the second summer that I lived there, it was overgrown and an eyesore. I couldn't even see the creek just behind my house anymore. One weekend, I borrowed my dad's utility trailer, and I spent 3 days clearing out our little section behind the houses, hauling all the debris away, probably 2 trips a day. My arms were covered in cuts from the briars, and apparently I was also dealing with sumac, poison ivy, or some other stuff, because by Monday, I was having an allergic reaction so badly that I went to the doc to get a steroid shot. I laid up in the house all day, and I get a knock at the door. It's the neighbor woman again. Apparently, there's a rule that you cannot store a trailer in the driveway for more than 3 days, and this was day 4. I needed to remove it by the end of the day or face a $500 fine. She handed me a paper listing the rule, and I considered just paying the fine, but instead I angrily drove an hour each way to return my dad's trailer after spending half the day already waiting in a hospital lobby. I got home after dark. What struck me as odd was there was a list of things that you couldn't store in your driveway: personal watercraft, boats, trailers, and so on. The odd part was that motorcycle was listed on there. I don't ride one myself, but I thought it was a totally reasonable thing to keep in a driveway. After I finished all of this work, this woman would routinely walk through my yard without asking, but since she was taking her grandkid to play in the creek, I never even said anything, though it bothered me that she never asked. A year or so later, I wanted to sell the house and move into something bigger. I had talked to a realtor already, and I was getting things tidied up to have the house shown. As I was cleaning out a drawer, I noticed that paper the HOA lady had given me, and I remembered the part about motorcycles being listed. You see, the HOA lady had started dating an older gentleman, and he had moved in with her. Turns out, he rode a Harley, which was always parked in her driveway. She was home, so I walked over there and politely informed her about the violation. The next day, the motorcycle was parked on her back porch, the one she bragged about to everyone who would listen so that she could tell them how much it cost. I laughed to myself, but then I remembered the part about it needing to be behind a fence. Another knock at the door, and within a few days, a fence company was building a 6-foot privacy fence which completely hid her fancy new deck. My realtor had been on my case for at least a week about needing to put up a for sale sign, so as soon as the fence was finished, I told her that it was okay. I sold the house quickly and moved out at the end of the month. Oh, and by the way, the fence was completely hideous and looked out of place because of the way her lot was shaped. Oh, what's the old saying? Rules for thee, but not for me? Look, HOA lady, you're going to obey the rules if OP has to. Alright, what do you think? HOA is angry that I called 311, not 911, to clean up the gasoline leak in extreme heat, posted by Live Through This 37. I live in a historic building separated into 8 units. 3 weeks ago, where we live, we experienced record-breaking temperatures. Our air conditioning could barely get at 85 degrees inside. I keep smelling automobile-grade gasoline, and I couldn't figure out where it was coming from. I saw that our neighbors, who recently purchased 2 condo units, had used a pressure washer and placed it in the hallway and common area. I'm on the 3rd floor, with no access to exit the building besides the stairwell, and it was left under said stairwell. The temperature in the hallway read 107 degrees. The pressure washer in an adjacent can of gasoline appeared to implode, and someone had covered the mess with 2 mattresses. Not knowing anyone was in the building, we're the only non-snowbirds in our southern home, I called 311 to ask how to safely clean up the gasoline. The fire company came out, per the operator's instructions, not mine, and it turns out the neighbors were home. The husband shoved me, a 5'5", 125-pound female, and called me a stupid idiot and B, and demanded the fire department leave. Then the HOA president called to say if the fire marshal came and our insurance rates went up, it would all be my fault. Never mind, we live in a hurricane zone. Everyone in the building is actively ignoring me right now. When I checked the community fire extinguishers, they'd expired in 2016. The new condo owners who retaliated against me have never lived in a property adjacent to others. They've been doing construction for over 7 months, despite him only being licensed to perform drywall work. I tried to explain that I only called 311 to get advice on how to clean up the gas spill, not to get anyone in trouble, but here I am being treated like a pariah around here. Maybe I'm just venting, but this seems unethical, no? The idiot stored flammable liquids under the only exit route from your home, and the HOA blames you? Time to let the fire marshal know about the expired extinguishers. The HOA should be enforcing rules against people who carry out unsafe practices, not people who report them. This is mental. You gotta report this kind of thing for you and others' safety. Everyone's together. What's going on? These people are nuts.
Neighbors steal our dog, we take their kids. Posted by Philip Hamilton, 19. This happened when I was around 12 or 13, so the details might be a little skewed. Most of my childhood, the house right next to ours had been condemned and abandoned. The property owners were willing to sell the land for $200. That's how bad it was. My family didn't buy it because the land tax in our area is high because we are a school of choice. Eventually, someone bought it and threw a manufactured home on it to replace the condemned home. Soon, a nice old man moved in next door, and we didn't pay close attention because he kept to himself. That was until his daughter moved in with him. Soon, our quiet little neighborhood turned into an episode of White Trash in Trouble. The daughter would fight with her spouse about every little thing and kept my family, along with our neighbors, up half the night. Their kids were the worst part of it all. We never knew how many kids lived in that house because so many different children and adults were in and out of there all the time. Me and my siblings tried to become friends with them because there are not too many kids our age in the town. We ended up being more of their babysitters than just a friendly neighborhood kid. They would come over to our house, and each of my siblings had a group of kids, 3 to 4 each, to watch over. These kids would walk in uninvited into our house while we would play with their sibling in the yard, then steal toys and games from our rooms. Honestly, they stole stuff from all over our house, but this was the main areas. They would either take it for themselves or throw it in our backyard river. They did that a lot if we made them mad for taking back our stuff. They would constantly run in and out of our house, even if no one was with them. They would steal all of the fruit in the basket my mom left out for us. My mom didn't kick them out immediately because she never wanted to deny a kid food if they need it. My mom confronted the parents about their behavior, and their 3-year-old son called her a witch. The parents refused to apologize for their behavior, saying stuff like, "If you loved it so much, you wouldn't have let them take it," or "Don't parent my kid." One thing they would specifically do with me is they pulled on my hair all the time. I'm a tomboy, and they would just call me a boy in a wig because girls can't play with skateboards, girls can't play with ninja action figures, or any other gender stereotype. They would constantly bombard me because they truly didn't know girls were allowed to play with anything they wanted. One of their heavier children stole my skateboard and jumped on it, breaking it in half. Similar to that "so no head" vine. Then they said that I shouldn't have been playing with one anyway. There are plenty more examples, but I think you get the point. The neighbors decided that because our house was nicer, that they had permission to run an electrical line from our backyard plugs to their house, which in itself is a bad thing, but they decided to run off our electric bill to triple the cost of our original. We were lower middle class and below the poverty level, so we couldn't afford that kind of bill. The rule in our house is, if you're not using it, it is turned off. That's why my parents were awfully surprised to see an $800 electric bill. Eventually, a person from our electric company came out to our house to see what was happening. They found an extension cord running to their house. The electrician simply unplugged it and then warned the neighbors of the legal reasons why they can't do that. Then said that should be the end of that problem. My mom, politely but sternly, went to the neighbors and told them that this was not okay. The neighbor had a small adult tantrum about it and cussed my mom out, but eventually came back into her home. My mom was obviously not pleased with their behavior, but tried not to escalate the situation any further. Our neighbors tried 1 or 2 more times to run the line from our house to theirs. They would move it at night so we wouldn't see them move it. Each time when we unplugged it, they would cuss us out and send their kids over to destroy something else in our home. Eventually, Mom straight up told them that if they or theirs would come on our property again, she would call the police and press charges. We could still be friends with their kids, but they weren't allowed on our land. They decided that because we won't let them use our electricity, that the next best option was to steal our dog from the backyard and claim that our dog attacked her kids, even though our dog was harmless and cowers at everything due to the bad owners before us. I'm guessing because our dog liked to rip her tags off a lot that the neighbors said that she was a stray, that attacked them. The pound came and took our puppo away. By the time my brothers and I got home, she was already gone. We assumed that she just ran off to our grandmothers who lived down the street. She would do this often because my grandma spoils her. When my parents came home, they about lost it, learning that our dog was missing. We obviously looked for her, but couldn't find her. After 2 days, we found her at the dog pound. The officer said it was obvious that our dog didn't hurt their kids, but they still had to take her in for an evaluation. My parents had spent $200 to get her out. The pound told us why the dog was taken, and my mom said enough was enough. Now, the revenge. When my mom got home, she sent my little brother over to their house to play with their kids. He was still friends with some of them at the time. My brother became a little spy that day. His job was to look around their house and report anything that could be suspicious. We learned from him that they were sending 3 kids to a twin bed. The entire house was cramped and dirty. The old man that lived there was hardly home because he couldn't stand his adult daughter that lived there, but he didn't want to evict her from the home and leave his grandkids homeless. All around, the kids were being neglected. With the information my brother gathered, my mom called CPS, Child Protective Services, on the home. Within the month, all of the children, minus one, who the old man cared for, were removed from the home. While I agree the foster system is bad, it was definitely better than what they were going through in that house. The mother of the children started to fight with the old man, her father, on everything. Because her kids were no longer there as a distraction, the old man was to be her next victim. The old man eventually was fed up with her and kicked her out of the home. All that was left in the home was the old man and the grandson he was fostering. They are both very kind and amazing neighbors. Crazy customer gets a pants full of Jack Daniels and acts shocked when he's caught. Posted by Winter Star Gamer. At the beginning of May, I had gotten promoted to a service manager at a pretty popular Midwestern grocery store. I've been working for this store for about 3 years now, and I'm pretty excited to be finally working my way up the chain. With my new responsibilities as a service manager, I now have many new, interesting stories to share with others. One of my many duties as a service manager is to either open the front end, which is 7 a.m. to 3 p.m., or to close the front end, 3 p.m. to 11 p.m., and help watch over the cashiers, customer service, self-checkouts, do overrides, and of course, either open or close the store. It is also important to note that many of the departments in the store have their own hours. For example, the hot food stations tend to close around 9 p.m., and our alcohol department closes at 10. The alcohol department has a gate that keeps customers locked out of the department until the store is fully closed. This story takes place on one of the nights I closed the store. It was about 10 minutes before closing time, and I am chatting with my closing cashier. Let's call her Stella. I tell Stella that I'm going to close one of the two main entrances and that I will be right back to help her with the last two customers that are still in the store. Around this time at night, there are only about a handful of employees in the store. This includes myself, Stella, the other service manager who is running the back room named David, the night stock manager, Caleb, and about 5 stalkers. As I am locking up one of the main entrances, in walks an older guy who is wearing a construction shirt and is looking as if he's in a rush. Before he gets too far into the store, I stop him for a moment. Sir, just so you know, we're closing in about 8 minutes. The guy nods his head and responds with, of course, I just need one thing and I'll be quick. Now, this normally happens, and 90% of the time, they are correct, and they are out of the store pretty quickly. I nod, and the man walks into the store as I go lock the first main entrance. I come back to the registers to help Stella bag the last few orders that are going through her line. I then see Caleb coming up to me about a minute later. Hey OP, do you have the wine and spirits key? I left my keys in my car on accident, and a customer wants to grab something from over there. I say yes, and hand him over my keys that are on my belt. Caleb says thanks, walks away, and I proceed to help one customer load her bags into her electric cart and offer to help her outside. I helped the customer out to her car with her groceries and made my way back into the store with her electric cart to plug it back in. The electric carts are kept in the second main entrance, which is the one I hadn't locked up yet. At this point, it was like 10:59 p.m. I was plugging in the electric cart when I see the man who came in just minutes ago walking out with a weird limp, along with Caleb, David, and 2 other stalkers following him. Caleb isn't yelling, but is obviously very annoyed. Hey, come on, just give us the bottle. We know it's in your pants. We won't call the police. Just hand it over and you won't get in trouble. The guy just responds with mumbling about how he put it back on the shelf. He wasn't stealing crap, and that we were accusing him of stealing. The guy proceeds to walk out of the store to his car and then drives off in a hurry. At this point, I am looking at Caleb in utter confusion. We get the doors locked and then he explains the story. After Caleb had gotten my keys, he went to go let the guy into wine and spirits so he could grab a bottle of alcohol. This is normally no problem as we let people do this all the time. Caleb had unlocked the gate and let the guy walk inside to grab what he needed. He watched as the guy grabbed a bottle of Jack Daniels off of the shelf and then walk out of the department. The guy says thanks and starts to walk away when Caleb is locking the gate. The guy darts into one of the nearby aisles, and once Caleb was done locking the gate, he noticed the guy come back out from the aisle, this time walking weirdly and without the bottle. Obviously, Caleb isn't stupid and immediately runs after the guy, telling him to stop. This catches the attention of David and 2 other stalkers who happen to be near the front end, and they soon appear, following Caleb, who is trailing behind the guy who very obviously just shoved a bottle of whiskey down his pants. The whole parade of people walks halfway across the store just following this man, telling him to stop before getting to the main entrance. What I still don't understand is that out of all the bottles of whiskey he could have grabbed, we carry some pretty high-end whiskeys, he just grabbed a bottle of crappy $20 whiskey. And before anyone asked, yes, we did check cameras. Yes, he did shove the bottle down his pants while he darted into an aisle. As much as I want there to be a more exciting ending, all we ended up doing was alerting our store director, got his photo from the cameras, and sent the tape to the police. Nothing has really come out of it since, sadly.
Frustrated with HOA and the neighbor who is president of my community. First off, I have cancer and literally the only one at home with my wife, as my parents are pretty much working and at the church every day. We live with them and cause no problems for anyone in our neighborhood as we moved into our condo last April. We rent and paid a year's rent up front just because of my situation, and also my mom is on disability. Also, my sister-in-law passed away at the same time and we had to move that same week. Thought it would be less of a pain. So we have 3 cars and a 2-car garage. Literally, the first 2 days of moving in, we get a complaint that the garage is not being used for 2 cars. But we were literally still moving stuff in. So we cleared that up, and we start getting more complaints like there's only 1 car in the garage and the other 2 cars are parked on the street. Turns out, our neighbor is president of the community and is watching our every move. When we moved in, he had a family friend help us, and he had an old beat-up pickup truck. That first week, we got a complaint about him and his truck. He was literally just parked on the street and popped the hood of his truck to check a few things. From that day, my mom got a gut feeling that our neighbors were racist because we looked poor and Mexican. By the way, we are not poor and live in a nice area. Pretty much OCD about how clean we keep our home. To this day, we had to send in 5 pictures of our garage because it kept being requested as 2 cars were not being used up in the garage. The landlord did not attend the HOA community weekly meeting or whatever and is now being fined $400 for our garage. Our garage, at the moment, still has 1 car and 1 open space. But this is where it gets messed up. We live in a gated community, and all of a sudden, our transponders were not accessing the crane at the gate, and we were not allowed into the community until speaking with security. Now they have temporarily reactivated our transponders for the time being, and we cannot speak on behalf of our home, only the landlord can. We literally see the president, who is a housewife at home all the time, looking through her window every time we come home or open the garage. It is very frustrating. My mom is now emotionally distressed and is looking into lawyers to possibly sue the HOA and or the landlord for discrimination, emotional distress, and other things. The president/neighbor literally had a party for their daughter the other week, and it was on their driveway with their garage open. That doesn't seem like it's being used for car purposes only. It just sucks that the association does not hear our side of the story and just keeps requesting picture after picture of the garage when they keep approving that it's fine. Now, there's a $400 fee for whatever freaking reason out of nowhere, and our landlord is hinting that we need to pay for that. There's a lot more to the story, as even the first day we moved in, the realtor came to our place at 9 p.m. abruptly, asking for the garage space to be cleared ASAP and that all the trash bins cannot be placed in the backyard and only in the garage. Bro, it's 9 p.m. Call or text us in the morning. I'm just so sick of the neighbor causing so much stress on my family without even coming to our door just to chat. My wife went over to their place and spoke with her husband, and he just came up with some bullcrap excuse that another neighbor was complaining and they had to let the association know. We live right next door. At least warn us about it. What would you do? My mom wants us to fight for some of our rent back and move out, trying to figure out this stress while navigating through chemotherapy. Do you agree with this answer? You rent, so no, the HOA has no responsibility to tell you anything. They don't have an agreement with you. They have an agreement with the landlord. Anything they tell you is a courtesy. Super sucks to rent in an HOA community for not getting good communication. I feel ya. Nobody's harassing you. The HOA may be harassing your landlord, but there's no way for you to know as you're not privy to their history or communication with the HOA. In addition, there's no need to throw out the race card when it's much more likely the president dislikes you for simply being a renter who's breaking community rules and lowering property values. You need to work this out with your landlord. So we're at a crossroads here. Is OP being picked on by these neighbors and HOA president, or do they actually have a point? Let me know what you think. HOA versus US military, posted by Dr. Time Fox. Prepare for an HOA imploding. This soldier lived in an HOA in a rather nice house, paid his dues and taxes, not a single penny owed to anyone. Then they get called up and put on deployment. This is when the HOA seized their home and, worst of all, sold it. So, despite continuing paying their HOA fees, the soldier never hears about this until they return just over a year later, and immediately the chain of command goes into action. A point of clarity here: when a soldier is on deployment, it is illegal to seize any of their property. Even the IRS is barred from any action. So, after ignoring a letter sent by JAG, the Army Judge Advocate General Corps, JAG and the soldiers sue the HOA. Seems that the HOA broke 11 federal laws. The judge then awarded the soldier $1.5 million in immediate return of their home and property. If none can be returned, then federal prosecution will happen. The soldier did get back their home and their property. It seems the HOA board kept it. Speaking of which, all had to sell their homes. The HOA was dissolved by court order, and what happens to those board members? Never seen again. Rumor has it they are in prison. Does it get any more nuclear than this? Holy cow, man.
Bully me into selling you my car? You ticked off the wrong mama bear. Posted by egrant03. So about 8 years ago, I'm selling a used car. The engine light was on, the AC needed recharging, and the fuel pump or something was out. So I go to my local trusted sales site. Ad goes up with a few pictures and the words, "I work weird hours, so I may not be able to accept a phone call. Please only text me." Yay to working swings and midnights, right? 'Twas actually college classes, but same thing for me. So a few days in, I get a pretty standard text. "Hi, I'm Matt. Is your car still available for sale?" Matt isn't his real name, but you get the idea. So text back that it is. A few standard texts about price and why the engine light's on and who did you get the quote from. I listed an approximate price on repairs as quoted from my trusted mechanic and whatnot and go back and forth. The next day, I get a text from him saying, "Are you going to take all your crap out of the car before you sell it to me, or is that my job?" Unwarranted hostility? Really? Come on, man. He's not the only interested party, so I text him back, "I'm not selling the car to you, so don't worry about it." I never said I would sell it to him, and he never asked if he was the only interested party, and others were arranging test drives already. I didn't need him and his less than full price partial commitment, and the crap he was complaining about is 3 textbooks and a bag I keep clothes in. 4 things. This guy didn't like to take no for an answer and starts calling and texting about how my car's paint is peeling, but true, but the pictures and description said so, and how dare I ask so much, $1,000, for a piece of crap car. I started replying for a time, telling him that he wasn't going to get the car, that I had other interested buyers, so he didn't need to worry about it, and so on. Then things got personal. This site gave you the option to link to Facebook so you could post at both places at the same time, so I had. I didn't have my privacy settings turned down as it was still early into Facebook's absolute reign, and I actually trusted them at the time. Silly me, I know. I hadn't anticipated that he would be able to find my info through the website's post and find my name, my location, pictures of my kid, my mother-in-law's obituary, and so on. Surprise me, he did. He starts texting me about how I should be ashamed of myself for saying no to him, a muscular dude, and me being quite a round female. He included a picture in one text, and he wasn't the muscular built man that he claimed to be. He looked like a beanpole with 2 ab muscles, so what, dude? He asked me if I even knew anything about cars, or if I made the post while on my period, so I didn't know what I was talking about. He texted that I should be lucky that I was already married, or else he would come to my house and, quote, "show me how a real man handles a little witch," end quote. He got close, but he didn't have an address, and the way my address pulls up on GPS, he would never find my apartment, thankfully. Small side info. Since I was in college at the time and needed a more flexible schedule, I worked as a school crossing guard. Every 2 weeks or so, we'd go in to sign our time cards in order to get paid. This crossing guard gig was a hire through my local PD. Not all crossing guard gigs are the same, but this one was. During one of these visits into the office, I was using my phone while I was waiting for my boss to get to me, my name being low in the alphabet. I hadn't yet blocked the dude as it hadn't been long since this started, and I was hoping it would fizzle out on its own. I didn't check my phone in class, choosing to turn it off to avoid ADHDing on it the entire day, and I was often flooded with several hours of text all at once. What I saw on my phone drove me over the cliff. He started texting about pictures that I had posted on Facebook about my 8 or 7-year-old son. He had just majorly crossed the line. The cleanest version of his text included things like, "Your kid is just as ugly as you are. I hope you don't plan on him leaving home to get a wife anytime soon," and how a smudge of dirt on his face from a day at the zoo looked like I'd beat him. "I didn't sell you a car and you're taking out your rage by threatening to hurt me and accusing me of beating my kid? Oh, heck no." Apparently, I was loud when I said what I did because my boss stepped right over to me next and asked what was wrong. Great person, 10 out of 10. Would boss again. I told her that I was getting this abusive text from a rando that tried to buy my car. I told her I was about to erase the text and block him, but she's like, "No, wait, don't do that. Let me see your phone." So happy I did not delete them, because this next part still makes my heart sore. I offer and she takes my phone, reading all the sick and vile things he texted to me. She tells me to wait until she's cleared the lobby of the other crossing guards, so I do. She then tells me to follow her behind the security doors at the PD station, still having my phone. I don't know what's happening, but I liked and trusted her, so I do. I follow her back to her office where she works on her computer, referring to my phone on occasion. She asks if all I have is the phone number or if I got his name too. I tell her that I only got a first name and scroll to the text where he introduced himself. A semi-uncomfortable amount of time later, she hands back my phone. Something to mention, my boss isn't just administrative. I didn't know it at the time, but she's a full-on lieutenant in the local PD. She came up the ranks from patrol, moving to a position where she exclusively investigated child, elder, and disabled abuse complaints before moving into her current desk position. Needless to say, she didn't take people threatening harm to kids lightly. Because I hadn't blocked the number, I still had the text messages with the dude's name, and she had used it to cross-search him and the phone number. Long story short, she knew exactly who he was. She says not to worry, but don't delete or respond to any of his texts anymore. She had it. If it got worse, I should call her or 911 as appropriate right away. Unconcerned and happy that she had the situation in hand, I leave and go to class. When I'm back to the office to sign my time card 2 weeks later, I had several unread texts from the guy. I had filtered them so I didn't see them pop up and hadn't read them. I had sold the car for full asking price and all but forgotten the entire situation. My boss tells me to wait for her again as she had something else for me to sign, and I again return to her office. She briefly explains that what she had for me was an actionable complaint that she needed me to sign for my issue 2 weeks ago. I remember everything all over again. She must see my face because she tells me not to worry and that she can tell me what's going on more after I actually sign the form. So I do. Dear Reddit, this is the best situation anyone could have asked for. The phone number tied to many people as the provider was known for cheap cell service for those that were desperate for a way to contact people or services or employment. But with the name Matt, again fake name, she was able to find out who was messing with me. She then got a driver's license, which led to an address, which led to a police report for possible domestic violence. Fall down the rabbit hole some more, and you find out that this dude had 5 kids by 4 women, and he was in arrears on his child support to them all. Hadn't been paying for 10 plus years, and it was in the neighborhood of $30,000 to $50,000 if memory serves. But he, somehow, just 2 weeks ago, requested a title transfer for a new to him, quite fancy old car. I don't remember the kind, but think high-end car show and massive insurance premiums. Being so far in arrears meant that my boss was able to place a seizure order on the car so it could be sold to pay back the child support. One of the baby mamas lives in a state where fleeing child support meant that you could have a warrant issued for your arrest. When she called the interested parties in that state to see if they wanted her to execute the arrest warrant, they said yes, with much haste. That was a funny turn of phrase, so I always remembered it. One conversation later, and my boss was able to determine that he was using the brother's social security number on his employment forms to avoid child support garnishments. This is all sorts of illegal, so she notified the guy's HR department so it could be corrected. They informed her that he would be fired for fraudulently submitting false documents. She then told me that about 4 days ago, she had executed the warrant on the dude for felony child abandonment and that the state he was to be held for was already en route to pick him up. It carried an 8 to 12 year sentence and he still had to pay back his child support. I could have dealt with the comment. I could have dealt with the not taking no for an answer. Even dealt with the cyber stalking. A little. But when your twisted mind okays you into bringing my kid into the picture, you done crossed the line. If you would have stopped at no, you wouldn't be in jail right now. Listening to failed robberies unravel over a radio. Posted by Maya the Strange One. So I started a retail job at a store that had just opened up in my city a couple months ago, and I have been waiting for the day to finally tell a fun tale. I have had a couple of run-ins with lowly Karens. For instance, on the store's opening day, I had a Karen ask me where the business shirts are. I showed her, and she said that she wanted a 3-pack of business shirts. I apologized and said that we didn't have 3 packs of business shirts, and she huffed and said, "You are Karen and don't know where anything is?" before walking off. Yeah, it's everyone's first day. Of course we're not going to know everything. But I digress. The story that this post is referring to just happened on my shift that I just got off of a couple hours before writing this post. For this story to make sense, our store has these push-to-talk devices. I'm unsure how many other retail stores do this, but I'm guessing it's commonplace. Basically, walkie-talkies that are fed through an earpiece. The first encounter of the day happened about 45 minutes into my shift. I hear over the radio from a coworker, "Hi, a customer just came up to me saying that they saw someone shoplifting and that they're still in the store." This obviously got my attention. Since working the checkouts, there isn't a lot of insane action that goes on other than the odd peak time here and there. I then hear the manager ask for a description of the culprits and what they were stealing. A bald man with a hat and a green jacket with a partner was stealing kitchen knives by replacing the new ones in the boxes on the shelves with crap ones. My interest is piqued even more when they said that they had spotted the culprits, and then I hear over the radio, "Okay, I'll call security. Make sure you check their bags before they leave." While this is happening, I'm fixing up a click and collect order for another customer, and when I come back out the registers and hand the customer their items, there's 2 security guards and all the managers double checking everything that they were buying. They ended up being let go, so my guess is that they realized that they were caught trying to steal and decided to bail on that idea and just buy the items instead. I thought that was the end of the excitement for the night. But then, it happened again. Not even an hour after the first event, I'm back at the registers and I hear the manager come on the radio and say, "Hi everyone on level 1, I would like you to keep an eye on the young blonde woman. She's wearing a gray jumper and acting really dodgy, just a heads up." Me and my coworkers at the checkouts all give each other a look, wondering what's going on. Then about 5 minutes later, we hear, "Definitely keep an eye out for her, she's definitely stealing stuff." At this point, I'm kind of chuckling because, again, this is quite a lot of excitement for someone who stands behind a register for a good majority of the shift. We then hear, "She's heading up to the elevators. Can someone on the ground floor by the back exit just stand by the elevator near men's? We just want to have a good idea of where she is." And as this is being said, I see a manager running towards the set of escalators in the store. And the radio chatter continues. "She's heading towards the beauty section. Can we get someone over there? Can someone call security? Security went home because they were sick." Of course they did. "Make sure she doesn't get near the exits. She just got on the elevator." I'm keeping watch by the elevator, kind of looking around, not really sure what to do at this point, just kind of thinking, what the heck is going on? Only to then hear over the radio, "She's gone into the basement," which made me chuckle again because the basement level hasn't been finished in our store yet and is obviously a dead end. The rest of what happened was told to me by the manager who caught her. He chased her into the basement and into a corner where he started taking pictures of her, I'm guessing for the police so they could know her appearance, and she immediately started freaking out and crying. After this, she yelled, "I've got nothing left to lose," and then charged at the manager, which obviously got him to back off real fast, and then she managed to get out of the store empty-handed. We scanned all of the goods that she had picked up and determined that she nearly stole $250 worth of goods, including a small TV monitor, Lego sets, clothes, and so on. In the end, we kind of all came to the conclusion that it was likely a junkie trying to steal stuff from our store so she could sell it on Facebook Marketplace or eBay to make a quick buck. The next half hour over the radio was them just describing the security camera footage, like the moment she realized she was caught, how desperately she was trying to get away, how funny it was seeing the managers chasing her around, and so on. Part of me wants to feel bad for the thief because it definitely sounded like she was in a really rough place, what with how the manager described her reaction to getting caught stealing so much. But at the same time, I can't help but feel like she was likely going to sell that stuff to get another hit of ice or something. But I guess the thing I got out of this is that there's quite a lot of eyes on you in retail stores, even if it may not seem like it. Anyway, just thought I'd share that experience with you guys. It was quite an exciting night for me. I can't believe you need me to bring you the merchandise I'm returning. Posted by Danzyman. Background. I was working at the customer service desk at a department store. A few things that Austin Mart is known for, this is all relevant context for the tale, are whole transaction discounts. A lot of comparable stores issue % off coupons that only apply to one item in the transaction or % off transaction coupons that exclude numerous categories of items, typically those with slimmer margins like electronics, more heavily regulated categories like alcohol, or items that are already on sale and clearance. Austin Mart doesn't carry much in the way of the first two exclusions, and their coupons don't exclude sale or clearance prices. Discount stacking. Austin Mart's coupons don't include the may not be combined with other offers language that many others do, so based on when each offer is valid, somewhere around 3/5 of the days in the year are days in which there are 2, or even occasionally 3, discounts that can be applied together. Austin Mart Cash. Roughly once a month, there's a period from 8 to 14 days long during which every purchase earns Austin Mart Cash, a $10 coupon for every $50 spent, which will be redeemable usually starting the next day after the end of the earning period and expire around 1 week later. This one can get tricky when returns are involved. When a return is done against a transaction that earned Austin Mart Cash, such that the remaining total from the original purchase falls below the same multiple of $50, there are different options depending on where in the cycle you are. Deactivate some of the earned Austin Mart Cash. If we're still in the earning period, this is the only option. Reduce the amount of your refund by the amount of Austin Mart Cash that you unearned, leaving the value of your Austin Mart Cash unchanged. During the spending period, if you haven't spent the Austin Mart Cash yet, you can choose either option. If you have already spent it, then this is the only option. The Yes We Can policy. Austin Mart's entry-level employees are more empowered to say yes to what customers want without getting management involved than in any other retail company that I've worked. If it's reasonable, the employee can say yes. They don't have to, and there are limits, but generally the default behavior is to give a yes as much as possible. Another aspect, especially relevant at the service desk, is that when the customer wants something we actually can't do, we're trained to not present this in the terms of, no, I can't do that, but rather in terms of, here's what I can do. At the service desk, we paid extra attention to the discounts that had been used on the customer's original purchase, and we would do our best to preserve these discounts when possible. If someone wanted to return something that they had bought at a better discount than they'd be able to get today, we might direct them to do an even exchange in order to preserve the price they had paid. Sometimes we'd manually reapply some coupon and/or sell price on a replacement purchase made following a return to give them the same deal that they'd have gotten if they'd bought the new item back on the date of their original purchase. We could look up past sell prices on any item by date for a few weeks after each sale ended. The story. On this particular day, there's continually a short line at the service desk, so any interaction that involves a customer leaving the counter and coming back means they will probably have to stand in line again for a few more minutes when they return. A lady brings up a bedding set that she had purchased, but which she now wants to exchange for a different one. I say, no problem, I can definitely help you with that. Do you have your receipt? Lady says, yes, I have it right here. Okay, so you have two options. You can do an even exchange at any register, but only if both items are exactly the same price. This is the simplest transaction, and it will preserve all of the discounts you got on your original purchase, as well as the Austin Mart Cash you earned that day. But I know that in the bedding department, there aren't typically very many things with the exact same price point, so more than likely you'll need to come back here to do it as a refund or purchase. I'm happy to take care of both parts of that transaction here if you don't find an item that qualifies for an even exchange. In order to leave both options available to you, I won't do anything with your return item just yet. Go ahead and find the new item that you want to get, and then, if you do find the same price item, you can go to any checkout, otherwise you can come back here and I'll take care of you. Lady heads out to the bedding department with her original set. A while later, she comes back up with a different bedding set, hands me the receipt for the original purchase, but she doesn't have that first set with her anymore. Okay, and the item you're returning? It's on the receipt, right there, as she points. Ma'am, I still need the original item in order to process this as an exchange. You mean I have to go back out there and haul that thing back up here again? But it's so heavy. Have one of your associates bring it up. Well, you would still have to go back there too, since you know where you actually put it. I put it on the shelf, where it goes, but the numbers are right there on the receipt. Yes, but I would still have to actually take the item that you're returning from you in order to apply its refund value towards the other items that you've selected. The woman, no longer acting like a lady, so I have to change her name at this point, but I already put it back. Why can't you just use the numbers off of the receipts? I'm breaking it down for her because if I did that without actually taking the item back, what's to stop someone from just saying that they put an item back in order to get a refund for something they didn't actually return? This is ridiculous. I didn't come here to be accused of stealing. There was probably more she said here, but I can't remember any of the rest of it. Insert the typical ranting of your choice. She then proceeds to throw the betting set across the counter at me and storms off. I go ahead and let our AP officer know about the situation. I never did find out whether she was trying to pull a fast one on us or if she genuinely did think that just putting her return item directly back on the shelf was actually the way it was supposed to be done. Entitled parent demands a 50% discount after a very minor inconvenience, posted by Zulva AZ. Before I start, I want to preface and say that I have high-functioning ASD, which is autism. Some of my social skills are limited, but I try to work my way around it and being as social as I can. So that's why you don't see a lot of conversation in this post compared to my prior post here. That, and my work surprisingly doesn't have many Karens running around given our location. We're smack dab in the middle of a retirement community, but we're the only store for the western side of my state. I thought my entitled parent stories would end with my now prior neighbor, but alas, entitlement has hit my work. I work for a hardware store in the US as what they call a customer sales associate. I'm one of 6 CSAs who are tasked to work in our paint department within the days. Out of those 6, I volunteered to do closing hours. I'm a night owl, so I usually don't wake up till around 1 or 2 p.m. Tonight was a quiet night for me and the closer for our sister department until I had 2 women, who I can assume are mother and daughter, approach my paint desk with some very worried and irritated expressions. I walk by and ask how they're doing and what I can help them with. The mother, mid-60s, explained that she returned her paint due to it having the consistency of jelly. I get confused and I grab the can from our return to manufacturer cart so I can examine and try to diagnose it. Lo and behold, they were right. It was like jelly. I asked them the usual questions about storage and use, and I saw no clues in how it could have reached this state in their home. I then referenced about our freight and how sometimes stuff like this happens. I explained to them that I will remake the paint and even discount it with the manager being notified. As I'm toiling through the list of assistant managers and department supervisors on the radio apps for the inventory phones, one of my assistant managers walks by with his lunch and dinner, and I catch him and ask if he could spare 5 seconds to look at the paint to confirm a discount. He says sure, and examines the paint as I'm citing why it was returned and the customers who wanted it replaced. He said to discount it by 20%, which is huge given we only discount paint by $2 to $5 depending on the issue. This $40 paint was now $31, but I decided to reduce it to $30 to round it out. Fast forward, the 2 arrive and I have this conversation. The mother is the entitled parent. Is it ready? Yep, it is. I spoke to my manager and I told them about the paint and they said to discount it by 20%, but I decided to discount you a little more. You mean to tell me that you discounted by 20% because of my troubles? This is ridiculous and you know it. I'm sorry, but I'm following what my manager had ordered me to do. How old are you? 21. I'm in my 60s, and you think you would have discounted me to 50% because I had to paint it? It was clear she didn't, as she may have likely hired someone to do it, but either way it was a frustrating moment. Unfortunately, no ma'am, though I'm terribly sorry about the issue with your old can, but I will not discount it further as my manager had requested me to discount it by 20%, and I even gave you a little more than 20%. The entitled parent is then ticked and asked to speak to our manager that discounted it. I explained that he's out to lunch and is the only one to know in our department very well. She asked if I could interrupt him, and I also said no because of company policy. She then asked for a list of all the managers, and it was at this point that I put my foot down and said no. They then walked off to check out, swearing to call a manager. After that, I went over to customer service with the old can to return it. A good friend of mine for customer service actually asked me about the 2 women, and I explained to her my side of the story. She said she also had an interaction with that entitled parent prior to her coming over to my paint desk. Entitled mom asked to try my shoes on, posted by Diana K. I have a pair of slipper backless check Vans that my sister gave me. I love these things. I get a lot of compliments about them. I was standing in line to buy some soda and snacks when someone taps me on the shoulder. It was a middle-aged woman and her 16-year-old daughter. Excuse me, I love your shoes. Where'd you get them? Well, I got them from my sister. I'm not sure how old they are. You could probably look online for them. What size shoe do you wear? A 9. "Hey, Evelyn, try these shoes on and see if you like them." She says, "What shoes?" The mom says, "The shoes this girl has on. Try them on to see if you like them, and then we can order them offline." I say that I am not going to let you try on my shoes. That's a weird thing to ask a stranger. Yeah, no, Mom. That was really weird to even think about. Good luck with the shoe hunt, I guess. I turn around to put my items on the belt, and the entitled mom taps me on the shoulder again. It is not weird. She could have just slipped them on quickly and no one would have known differently. So you are being rude. You could have said no without being rude. Jeez. Look, you don't ask a stranger to take their shoes off so you can put your feet in them. It was a weird thing to ask, and even your kid agreed. So stop touching me and don't ask people stuff like that again. The entitled mom says that it was not weird, but the daughter says that it was weird. I quickly paid and left before I could hear what else entitled mom might say. They had a big cart of stuff, so luckily they didn't follow me into the parking lot to discuss it more. Poor Evelyn with a mom like that. Entitled mother tried to steal my little sister's ice cream, posted by Vexlem. Hi y'all, this happened about 2 weeks ago while we were on a trip, and I forgot about it until my older sister told me about it. OMG, it is crazy. So we just finished eating our lunch, around 4 p.m. Yes, it's basically dinner, but we call it lunch. We only eat twice a day, breakfast and lunch, and then at nighttime, we get things like fruit for health problems for my little sister. She had so many cavities, and so we gave her a ban on sugar. So, we were thinking that ice cream would be nice, and we saw that there was this old-fashioned ice cream place which had sugar-free vanilla ice cream. We entered the place, and I must say, paying $15 for a cone and 1 scoop is very expensive. Usually, it's like $3 for them, but here, it's much higher. Anyways, this place was quite popular, so it had a line. It took us around 10 minutes of waiting just to get into the small shop, and around 5 minutes extra of waiting inside till we actually got to the counter. While waiting, there was this very polite kid who was playing rock, paper, scissors with my little sister. Sister's 5, and he looked around 6 or 7 years old. He was very talkative, but also very kind, and even pretended to lose when my little sister lost in a game. Next to this kid was the entitled mother, who was on the phone with her loud voice, sort of lecturing someone, and she had this bossy attitude. Anyways, we get to the counter, and I always go for the more expensive items because, hey, why not? I got the hot fudge brownie sundae, and oh, it was bomb, but it was expensive at $25. Anyways, we finish ordering. My mom and my dad order a banana boat, little sister orders a small 1-scoop cone of ice cream, and my older sister ordered the same as me. In the shop, there were 2 sections. Section 1 was where you ordered, and Section 2 is where you wait and you get your ice cream. We finish and go to Section 2, where entitled mother starts ordering. I don't know what she was thinking when she entered the store, but when she saw the prices, she flipped and she yelled at the cashier, yelled at her son for choosing the most expensive place. Basically, a Karen flip over. Little sister saw this, and by the way, she's really shy when she meets a person, so she hides behind my mom. Entitled mother saw us and comes over to us and says that her child wants to get the same thing as my little sister, and that she said that he had too much ice cream and that we should give my little sister ice cream to the boy. The nice kid was turning red and kept telling his mom that it's okay that he doesn't want ice cream anymore, but his mom still tries to talk to us about giving my little sister's ice cream to her. The front desk guy who gives the ice cream gave my little sister ice cream and told her that the rest will be ready in a second. Meanwhile, the manager is talking to the woman, telling her to either order politely and stop bothering us or to get out of the store. She's yelling at him that it's a free country and that she can do anything she wants. She sees the ice cream in my hands and says, "Thank you," while trying to grab it from my hands. I forgot to mention that I'm 5'6", and this woman looked like about 4'11" at max, so I easily just put my ice cream up, and even she tried to jump and grab it. She looks at me and calls me a demon and said that I wasn't raised properly. I told her that her son had more manners than she did, and that's when she broke out yelling and screaming, falling to the ground. Oh, he hurt me. But the thing is, no one's buying it. They're all kind of laughing at her. She gets embarrassed and leaves the store while calling her son's name out. The manager gave the nice kid a small hard candy and told him to keep being a good boy. This is where we never see entitled mother again. The manager apologizes, and guesses what? We get the bill 50% off. My dad was dancing while he saw the 50% off on screen. In the end, we got 50% ice cream, and I loved it. To be honest, I think the price is worth the ice cream. Usually for an entitled parent story, the entitled parent would come back and make another problem, but sadly in our story, entitled mother gave up and went embarrassed out of the shop. I hope the nice kid never becomes like his mom and stays being the nice kid that he is.